right, now let's move forward with the other updates that we are tracking. Indians are making us richer. It's official. According to the Forbes 2025 list of the America's richest immigrants, India has contributed the highest number of immigrants, billionaires, which is 12 this year, overtaking the Israel as the leading birthplace of the billionaire immigrants. The 125 billionaire immigrants identified by Forbes hail from 43 countries, but nearly two-thirds of them were born in India, Israel, Taiwan, Canada, China, and 5 other nations. However, US President Donald Trump has slapped a whopping 50% tariffs on India, which is among the highest in the world. Now, amid India's strong stance, calling the move unjustifiable, unfair, and unreasonable, meanwhile, the US Treasury Secretary has warned that the Trump administration could impose additional secondary tariffs on India, with the final decision depending on the outcome of the meeting between President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Joining me on the broadcast to speak on how exactly the future of the Indian businesses abroad and those in the trade sector with the United States is concerned. Now, fellow at the Center for the Strategic and International Studies, Mr. Gaurav is joining me live on the telecast. Sir, appreciate you joining me live. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Now, my first question to you would be in the view of the ongoing developments between a trade deal that could be positioned and coming soon between India and the United States. What is your analysis of the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs against India?
Certainly, the impact is very much going to be there. We are already hearing from exporters in India that are exposed to the US market, particularly in, say, gems and jewelry, where diamond manufacturers really rely on the US market. There, a sudden escalation in tariffs is naturally going to create difficulties. We know that India has a huge trade surplus with the US, meaning that India sells to the US a lot more than it buys. So it is a very important export market for the country. But I think we must remember that the negotiations are still very much on. And so hopefully by the time tariffs kick in, there is some meeting of minds and there is some kind of a deal which manages to avoid this.
Well, absolutely. There is some hope till we get the agreement finalized. But to also look at the other side of it, why is Donald Trump being hostile towards India? Is it just a negotiation tactic or is it beyond than that?
I think we have to look at two, three things here. Number one, we obviously know that President Trump is trying to rebalance relationships that the US has with the entire world. And so India is not unique to that scenario. We have seen President Trump negotiate these deals, and these negotiation tactics have been used with other partners as well, other allies as well, whether that's the EU or whether that's Korea or Japan. So it's not unique to India, I think, is one. Second, of course, there is a lot of geopolitics at play here, which is, I think, very clear. And so I think we must remember, though, in the end, that the two countries are still negotiating a deal at the and yes, there has been an escalation of rhetoric on India at the highest level. But the economic realities are so aligned that we do hope that things will resolve. And we know that the USTR is leading a delegation to India to negotiate actually next week. As much as it seems like India is being singled out, India is not unique. And number two, as much as it seems like that things are rocky, and yes, this is a bit of a stress test on the relationship, we must remember that the two countries are still trying to negotiate and talk this through. And so I actually think that may happen because it has happened with other countries. And so I think that's where we are.
Well, absolutely. But as being an Indian, what is your analysis and how do you feel, more importantly, being an Indian, looking at these developments from that point of view, given the interest of Indians as well, especially in the sectors of business and finance, regarding the trade deal that could also potentially impact many of us?
Well, no, certainly. I think we must remember that we have seen in the last couple of decades a sustained bipartisan effort to build the US-India relationship and to have two ties that are really founded on people-to-people ties, right? It's not just government to government, but it is a lot of Indian diaspora that works in the US, that contributes to the US economy, that has done exceedingly well in the United States in many ways when we look at the Fortune 500 companies and we look at the leadership in those, for instance. But at the same point of time, this is very much about economics and business and about geopolitics. And from that context, it is just a case of two very large economies trying to negotiate market access into each other and trying to figure out how to do this. So I think my only comment would be that yes, this is a bit of a stress, and that the two countries, while there has been sustained momentum in the last 2 decades, there is now some amount of stress on the table. But I also think that the economics and the people-to-people ties are really strong, and they are the ones who are going to make sure that this stress is temporary and that the economic and people-to-people ties, those realities are so strong that I think they will overcome the stress at some point of time. So I think we will make this through is what I would say to that question. Yeah.
Yes, certainly. I believe that there would be a breakthrough through the people and people ties as well. But, at the same time, where India had been left with tough choices after the Alaska summit did not yield a very potentially favorable result. What do you think, sir, in your opinion, remain to be the opportunities amid the Donald Trump's tantrums for India? And given how quickly he changes his mind, India remains to be in a hotspot where the opportunities for India could also make a very great way for for us to position our stand clearly.
No, I think Indian businesses would want to obviously be able to export a lot more to the US. And so as it happens in any trade deal, there is some element of give and take. So I think from the perspective of Indian businesses, I think what is key is to find more market in the US. And we have seen that in the last few years, the Modi government has negotiated trade agreements with a lot of countries, including Australia, the UK more recently, UAE. And so these are all markets, profitable markets for Indian exporters. And so I think they would also want the price of the US market. So I think what US can provide to Indian businesses is the economic opportunity for their exports. So I think from that context, I think Indian businesses, Indian diaspora, would want things to stabilize because the economic relationship and economic stability in trade in tariffs is really critical to their operations. Many of them own businesses that do a lot of trade between the two countries, between the people to ties, and they're going to be affected by this if the tariffs come into force. So it is in their interest for the negotiations to conclude as smoothly and as swiftly as possible, because that is what will lead to long-term prosperity. Both the countries need to keep their eyes on the ball.
Absolutely. But, sir, when we see the optics of what has been going on, as there has been some sort of mistrust in the White House decisions from the Indians as well, investing and very rigorously involved in the trade business. Do you think that Donald Trump, after him being another time for the second round for being the president of the United States, is making a mistake by upsetting the Indian diaspora there, given the recent developments and announcement that he has been making because of the tariffs?
I think we have to wait and watch as to how this plays out, because as we know, relationships between two countries are complex, and sometimes there are always stresses in any relationship, right? But I think whether those lead to any long-term impact or not, it remains to be seen. So I think it is too early to say that this would lead to a long-term rupture in ties. I don't think we are there yet. Yes, there are some storms. Yes, there is some amount of stress, but we are not at a point where that is going to cause the kind of damage which would be detrimental to the relationship. So I think fingers crossed, wait and watch. I think that is how Indian diaspora would be looking at it in the US, and hoping that the two leaders and their teams are able to negotiate as they have done in the past. So I think we are not at a point where things are bad enough for such a thing to be acknowledged.
Mr. Sanswal, in fact, finally, as I proceed towards the end of this discussion, my final and the foremost question would be, what do you think as the long-term impact of the Trump's offensive? And this at large against India is also going to play a very crucial part for India to, in the future, think very particularly about investing and also in the trade ties with the United States.
Well, I think it's very clear that India would more aggressively look to diversify and its trading partnerships. I think we've already seen the Ministry of External Affairs release some statements regarding that. And so the effort may be to diversify, find alternate markets for Indian exports. But we must remember that's not an easy process. It takes a lot of time to reconfigure supply chains. So yes, the long-term impact of India finding alternate markets is a long route. And in that context, I think the market realities will override other considerations. And once that happens, I think there would be a lot of momentum to negotiate this, and I think that will happen because you're talking about two of among the top five economies of the world. So it is going to be really important for the two to be able to trade with some degree of certainty. And we must remember that even in these times, the services sector of India, which contributes a lot to our GDP and to our trade, that is still untouched. So services sector is still contributing a lot. So the economic ties still remain strong, and I think in the long term, India and US would see economic benefit in continuing to have stability in economic relations. But India would obviously continue to try and find alternate markets as well, because diversification is good for its own economic interests. So I think that's my answer, that this is going to be, in the long term, an economic imperative for the two countries to get along and find stability in their.
Thank you, sir, for speaking to us, and appreciate you joining me. Well, that is Gaurav Sanswal, who is a fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Appreciate you joining me for an in-depth discussion on what remains to be the future and how does the Trump's announcement against the tariffs of India will also position India's stand in also aiding the trade economies and reforms for the Indian diaspora.